minutes ago, Sonali and I were actually thinking whether anybody is going to be part of this masterclass or not, because there was literally just one person. You were there. And we were like, okay, maybe we're going to present to just one person today and use the recording for some of the later master classes that we plan in the future. But glad to see a full house. I'm sorry there isn't enough space, but all of you, are waiting to hear us and are there. Thank you so much. And once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. I've already been introduced, but a quick introduction again. I am Sanjeeta Agnihotri, and I work as the director at the Center for Communication and Change India. We are the sister organization for the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health's Center for Communication programs based in Baltimore in the US. And we primarily work on a range of activities around the discipline of social and behavior change communication that some of you may be already implementing or integrating as part of your ongoing programs or some of your past programs, or maybe are planning to use it as a tool in the future, right? So on that note, I'm going to start the presentation on the human-centered design thinking process. Anybody who's come across this concept in the past? Remotely heard of it? Would you like to say a few words? What is your understanding of this process? Ma'am, please go ahead. Great. Excellent.
Recently, after I left my corporate job, now I'm full-time into my own NGO, which is environmental NGO, which of course works with humans, because in India you cannot differentiate between ecology, environment, and people outside of that. So there's a lot of human-centered empathy designs, which I practice from my past 25 years into design thinking into this, in fact, and it's been marvelous.
We should have asked you to join us here as one of the facilitators.
I would love this was my inner call to come in here, in fact. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. We would really appreciate any contributions.
So I think you asked something. I think empathy is the key word in this, in fact. So everything to do, and empathy is nothing to do with only a product or design or any. It can be put into services, it can be put into NGO work, everything, in fact.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Yes, I did see a few other raised hands. Maybe we can take one more contribution. Yes, at the back.
Namaskar, Shweta this side. So I've been in what we call skilling for last 10 years, but I was part of technically the first skill tech of the country. And we used to focus on behavior change in training. So two things which are important. So we made something for drivers. So one is the WIFM factor. What is in for me? Why should I be attending that workshop? And secondly, baselining it to the lowest level. So if I talk about drivers, we baselined it to Vikram drivers, who are those shared auto drivers. And we had a lot of success stories in training them in Mahakumbh of 2013. And then we were also doing it for road safety in Kolkata. And there, the learning was you have to be focused about the target audience. I mean, if you're targeting road safety, can we target all the citizens? Or alternatively, in our case, we just targeted the school children and the drivers.
Right.
So we followed that. So targeting and baselining is...
We'd love to hear more about those interventions, perhaps after the masterclass, but thanks for that contribution. So I think we do see some common themes here, One of you had mentioned about how important empathy is, right? Somebody said that it's very important to align yourself with the audience. It's so important that we keep the people at the center of the process. Our target audience should be at the center of our process. And of course, all of us claim to keep them at the center of the process of designing interventions or implementing interventions. But HCD takes it to a different level altogether, right? So when we say empathy, it is obviously different from sympathy. When you're sympathizing with someone, you're not really stepping into that person's shoes, right? But when you are empathizing, you are taking it to a next level. You are sort of looking at everything from the audience's lens. You are taking off your own lens. You are not You're not wearing your shoes any longer. You are stepping into the audience's shoes to sort of see how, they look at things, what's their worldview of things, and, what are some of the barriers that they are facing with regards to the behavior that we are trying to change here, right? So on that note, I will start my presentation. So like I said, the human-centered design looks at complex things from the perspective of the people who will be affected by them, right? So essentially, our target audience is the one we need to empathize with, we need to work with, and essentially give them the baton of the project, right? We just work together as guides to sort of facilitate the process, but essentially, they are the ones who decide what solution works best for them, right? Now, the HCD process has been used not just in the development sector or in the corporate sector, but primarily by many marketing agencies, and I'm going to give you a few examples of that. So what do we see here? Sorry? MRI machine, right? So what is the experience of any individual undergoing a scan? How is it? Some of you may have gone through it. It's scary, it's unnerving, you're asked to stay still, absolutely, and it's not one of the most pleasant experiences one would have gone through. Imagine what it would be for children. Imagine what it would be like for kids, small children who have to unfortunately undergo a scan. So this industrial designer called Doug Dietz came up with a solution in, for one of the pediatric wards diagnostic centers. And this is what he came up with. So if you see here, this actually now looks like an ocean world, right? Any child who walks into this diagnostic center will immediately be, wow, it's so colorful. It almost looks like a swing, isn't it? There's a little submarine there, and it takes you inside, and it's almost like, some sort of outworldly experience. You're in the middle of the ocean. So he simply has made some very creative innovations and interventions to sort of remodel this completely, right? He didn't change the machine. The process is still the same. The result will still be the same. All he has done is enhance the experience of the user or enhance the experience of the audience, right? Next, we have the example of Heinz tomato ketchup. Most of us have used this kind of a bottle. Some of us may still be using it. What's the challenge here? You have to keep pushing it, and still it doesn't come out. Or it doesn't come out in the right quantity, right? Sometimes you're trying to push, it's not coming out. And sometimes it comes out in like a dump together, right? So Heinz did a little bit of research, in fact deployed the human-centered design process and came up with this solution that almost all ketchup companies are now following, which is coming up with this inverted bottle, almost like a squeezy. So you just flip it open, take out the amount you want, you don't have to keep pushing it, and you'll get the right quantity as per your need, right? So again, a very simple example of how they've used HCD to come up with an innovative but a very simple solution that is rooted in the audience's needs. Next, we have Spotify. I'm sure most of you would be using some of the other, music platform, music app. Anybody who's using Spotify here? I see a lot of raised hands. So what's the USP of Spotify? Yeah. So remember the days when we didn't have such platforms or didn't have these kind of apps? One would either go to YouTube, and before that one would buy cassettes, CDs, and so on, right? Or you would carry a pen drive also a couple of years back. But with Spotify, they've completely revolutionized the whole process of just listening to music. It's customized, it's tailor-made as per your choices, right? So the kind of music you like, it gives you more suggestions around it, right? So if, I like listening to pop music, Hindi pop or English pop, they're going to come up with more suggestions. And it's tailor-made. You can save your songs, you can listen to it offline. So they've really empathized with the audience to come up with great simple solutions essentially, which are not complicated at all, and have sort of come up with something which is very innovative and very creative, right? And it can be sort of adapted over and over again for different sets of audiences, right? Next, we have the example of Lay's. Now, this is a very specific research that I'll talk about. Lay's conducted a research with young women and found that, like most women, young women are also very particular about not spoiling their nails while having chips, right? So what they usually do is the last bits and pieces may get into the nails of the woman who's eating it, so she tends to avoid it and just throw the pack away. So what solution they came up with? This is the solution. So it's convenient, maybe it's slightly more priced, but it's convenient, it is stackable, the chips don't break so they don't get into your nails. It's hygienic, you can consume the amount you want and then you can keep it back and consume the rest later. Yeah? Again, very simple. There's nothing, extremely difficult or, something which is really rooted in the audience's challenge. So what is the audience hoping to get out of it? Maybe the audience doesn't know themselves, but we as designers need to come up with those potential solutions that are simple and easy to practice. Airbnb. This is a platform that has not just helped people who are tourists, who are visiting a particular country or a city, but they are also helping residents to sort of rent out their spaces, right? So it works both the ways. Oral-B toothbrushes. So when Oral-B was, planning to come up with products for young children, they did a lot of research again. And you would have noticed how, the toothbrushes for young children are very different from the toothbrushes that adults use. Can anybody tell me what the difference is? Size is smaller. It's colorful. Yes, it is soft. The bristles are soft. You're not really getting the key difference. The handle. You may have noticed that the bristle pointer is very small and the handle is actually very thick and sturdy. This is basically a result out of the research that they did. What they found was that initially when they sort of came up with specific dental hygiene products, especially toothbrushes for young children, it wasn't really picking up in the market, right? So they went back, did a little bit of research and found that young children have low dexterity, right? They can't really use their fingers like us. Like we may just hold the toothbrush using a couple of fingers, but they need a proper grip to hold on to a toothbrush. And to maintain that grip, they need a sturdier sort of handle kind of a thing, right? So that's how they came up with that innovative product, which is now ruling the market. Next, we have Netflix. This is like a sister for Spotify, but of course in the audiovisual space. Again, highly customized. People can, even try it out. There is a free trial. There are different kinds of packages. There are all kinds of content here, right? You can create your own profile. So even if you buy a family pack, 4 different people can have 4 different profiles, and it gives you suggestions based on your viewer history. Again, very simple, highly customized. And finally, we have our very own Mumbai Dabbawalas. Yeah? It's an indigenous example of design thinking. So it brings, the Dabbawalas actually bring hot lunch boxes to your table at the lunchtime, and they have their own unique coding system, right? It has been there for over 150 years now, but they haven't missed a lunchbox till now, right? Again, very simple. It's employing the local population. It's innovative, and it's meeting the audience's need, which is that they need hot lunch boxes at their tables during the lunchtime. Yeah? So these are some of the examples that give you a sense of how it is important to empathize with the audience, keep them at the center of the design process whenever we are coming up with solutions, or let's say potential solutions as part of our programs, whether it's at the individual level, at the group level, or at the community level at large. We need to keep the audience at the center of our processes, right? So human-centered design thinking does exactly that. Human-centered design is a creative approach to problem solving. It starts with the people you're designing for, right? So it starts with the vision of what we want these people to do, and it ends with tailor-made, customized solutions. I just gave you a few examples of that. There are plenty of examples. I'm sure by the time we have the next CSR summit, some of you may actually come up with examples from your own field experiences, right? It brings together what is desirable from a human point of view with what is technologically feasible and economically viable. So even though we encourage you to come up with as many crazy ideas as possible, so again, going back to empathy, that is, of course, the foundation of the HCD process, but there's something else that we want to challenge here, our usual way of thinking, which is, us as managers, as academicians, as administrators, maybe sitting in our air-conditioned office, and on the basis of our own experience of working with the audience, feel that this may work, this may not work, and let's test it out in the field. Couple of, maybe a pilot test will help us to determine whether this works or not, and then we'll sort of bring it to scale. But human-centered design challenges that thought process. It says that you need to really step out of your shoes, practice empathy, and look at everything from the audience's perspective, right? You also need to come up with not just the usual, of course, if we are challenging the usual way of thinking, we are also challenging the usual solutions that one may come up with. So the idea is that come up with as many crazy ideas as possible, because you never know what really works with the audience, right? Sometimes we feel that, just because a potential solution is not aligned to my project or is not aligned to my donor's idea of what works on the ground, I won't implement it, right? So we have our own set of challenges. So the idea is that let's, not just think out of the box, let's throw the box away completely. Let's come up with as many crazy ideas as possible and then sort of shortlist those ideas, evaluate those ideas on these three criteria, which is whether the solution or the potential solution is desirable for the target audience, which means is it something that they desire? Is it something that is going to add value to their life? Is it something that is feasible, which means do we have the technology to implement this? Do we have the resources? And finally, is it viable? Of course, we are all working in our project settings. We have limited funding, we have a limited timeline. So we also need to look at things from that perspective. Of course, the first round involves coming up with as many creative ideas, but then we need to shortlist them using these three evaluation criteria, right? I've already talked about how, the HCD process essentially brings many voices and perspectives together. So we don't just want to work as, like a one-man team. We want to involve all the audience there. Of course, you can pick a sample of the people you're working with, but essentially empathizing with them. And my colleague Sonali is going to talk about the 5 steps of the HCD process, and she'll exactly tell you how we practice empathy as part of the process itself, right? So, again, looking at everything from the audience's perspective, bringing in as many voices as possible so that our pool of information is rich. We sort of throw the boxes away. We think, we come up with innovative and creative solutions which are also rooted in the audience's key challenges. And it also listens and learns to build understanding and empathy between different audiences. That is, of course, if you have different sets of target audiences. It is comfortable with ambiguity and creativity. Like I said, We may have a set method of thinking or have certain set solutions in our mind. We don't want to sort of follow the same path over and over again. We want to challenge that thinking, right? One of the key concepts or one of the key foundations of this HCD process is fail fast and fail cheaply, okay? So we don't want to be very invested in our solutions. What happens is we put in too much investment, time and energy in whatever we are building. We feel that, no, I've done secondary research, I've done formative research, and this is what it shows, this will work with the audience, this is what my experience says. But what happens when we implement it on ground? Do we see the same results? Do we always see the same results? It may work for a certain kind of audience, may not work for another, right? So the idea is that we don't want to invest too much energy in just coming up with one or two solutions. We want to, if one doesn't work, okay, let's go back to the design board, right? So we have to sort of integrate the process in our project cycle in that way. It is biased towards action, does not wait to know, makes to learn. The idea is, of course, if you are failing fast and failing cheaply, it is very action-oriented, right? So you have to implement it on ground, you have to test your potential solutions with the audience in order to ensure that they are working or not. And if they are not, you sort of make the changes or tweaks that are needed here. Human-centered discovery can help us develop new questions and knowledge, especially relating to how different parts of the system interact and relate to each other, right? So as you know, this is a very basic principle of social and behavior change, that the way people behave is not just a result of their individual interaction with the society, right? It's, you know, various level of influences at the individual level, at the interpersonal level, at the group level, at the community level, and at the society level at large, right? We are part of this larger society, a larger ecology, and the way we behave, I mean, you all are sitting very silently here and listening to this presentation, but are you the same way at home? You're much more relaxed, right? Your persona at home is very different from your persona in a restaurant versus an office and so on, right? So we need to factor all of these psychographic elements of our audience. Oftentimes when we are sort of segmenting our audience or the people we want to work with, we say, for example, women between 15 to 50 years of age, residing in XYZ colony of, you know, Banaras, right? And this is going to be our audience. But human-centered design process challenges that approach. It says that let's not look at women, they are not all the same. Of course, they are, you know, the same sex, but at the same time, they are not same people. I mean, we have women here as well, but not all of them are going to be same. They all have different needs with regards to the challenge we are trying to address. So the idea is trying to be as specific as possible. We seek to see the problem in fresh ways, and how can we unknow what we know so we approach problems with fresh eyes? Yeah? Now here is another example. Usually, you know, this example is from ANC visits or antenatal checkups, right? So usually, you know, oftentimes when we are collecting data or talking to pregnant women or new mothers, we talk about how many ANC visits did you attend for the birth of your last child, right? This is our usual way of asking the question. But if you were to sort of use the HCD way of asking the question, you would say, tell me a story about how you prepared for the birth of your last child. We are asking the same thing, but in a different way. And the reason why we are differing in the second sort of way of asking is because if we are asking the woman to tell a story, to narrate a story about how she prepared for the birth of her last child, she may actually come up with so much more that we thought was not even there, that did not even exist. Some of the challenges, some of the barriers, some of the fears, some of the dreams that she may have, right? So the idea is not just looking at people as plain demographics, but looking at them as, you know, these psychographic characters. Like I said, you know, if we ask those questions, we may come up with a totally different story, a totally different picture of who this person is, right? She may talk about her cultural beliefs, practices, her knowledge, education. She may talk about the environment, nutrition, food security, family, her current economic profile, all of this, right? Okay, with that, I'll hand over to my colleague Sonali. How are we doing on the time? Okay, great, thank you. So she's going to take you through all the 5 steps of the HCD process. Do you need the pointer?
Thank you. So I would rather be amongst you rather than be on the stage. So now we are going to launch into the how of design thinking. And the key thing here is to question. How, why, who, what, when. So all of these questions are an integral part of the design thinking process. So I'll ask a question. Start with a question. How many of you have heard of Mr. Arunachalam Muruganthanam? Okay, I see 2 or 3 raised hands. How many of you have heard of Padman or seen the movie Padman? Akshay Kumar. More hands are there. So would any one of you would like to tell me what it was about? It was about sanitary napkins. Okay. Great. So from sanitary napkins, the product itself, you have moved on and captured low cost, accessible. So all these words are being used, and somewhere it is being linked to the end user who is going to use that. So design thinking, as we have already had some discussion on empathy, right? So empathy is all about understanding not what we would like, but what the user, them would like. Okay, it's not a we versus them. It's how they would like to experience that product or that design or that solution. So it's about understanding who the audience is, and that is the core, that is the foundation of this entire design thinking process, that until and unless we have empathy, we empathize with the audience, we put ourselves into their shoes, we are not going to reach anywhere. So if we don't do that, we are just us, we are not them. So that is the entire take. So I will use the example of Padman to make it more relatable, and how design thinking process was used, probably by him, without knowing that he was using it, but he used it nonetheless. So can any of you tell me who was the audience? Who was the user for Padman? Village woman, his wife. I think most of us agree that ultimately he was designing for the woman. But what kind of a woman? What was her need, her want, her motivation? What was her experience that he wanted to change? Isn't it? So there were a lot of questions there. What is she going through? So there are 3 steps to it. Who is the audience? So as Sanjeeta mentioned previously, that we are going to create a profile of the audience, a demographic profile, from which geography that person is coming from, what is the age, what is the sex, what is the education, what is the caste, class, all these things matter. We are also going to look at the psychographic aspects of that profile. So, they may be, during that period, they may be experiencing a lot of different emotions. So what does that person need? What do they want? What are their aspirations? What are their awareness levels like? So all of this data goes into informing who the audience or who the end user is for us. So we have to first map the, we use many words, stakeholder, user, audience, whatever you want to use. So that is the core thing, empathy, and we do not lose sight of that fact that this is the audience for whom we are designing, okay? And so first is the stakeholder mapping or the user mapping. Then we create a persona or a profile. Then we come to the third stage, we create a journey map. So for Padman, what would be the journey map of that woman? In that case, I think the first reference was his wife. So from the start point of her periods till the end, what is she going through? What are the challenges that she is facing? What does she need? Okay, so now we come to the next stage. So, of course, getting into the shoes of the user or the audience is very, very important. You may be thinking, okay, this is a very, basic thing. But that is the need, perhaps. The resources may be only that much. So who is the audience? What is, what are the things that they have access to? That is what we are thinking about here. So from the empathy, once we have understood the audience, now we define the problem. What was the problem here? The problem was that his wife or other women in that community coming from that, not very good socioeconomic status, they did not have access to good hygienic sanitary products, right? That was the problem. So creating that problem statement is an essential part of this stage. This is the define stage. You define the problem, you understand what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. I mean, problem is not only about looking at the negatives, right? That this is a pain point, this is a challenge, but understand what are the entry points, what is the scope of building from that problem or going towards that solution. So in define stage, it is a further step towards understanding your audience and understanding that need and putting it into the form of a guiding statement which will guide the rest of the design process. So here, when we are talking about the problem, what do you think is the most important thing to do? Any idea? Yeah. So you are talking about the solution. She said smart. So I think it is more towards going towards the solution, what a solution should be like. It should have a focus. Very good. Thank you. So the problem should have a focus. What is it exactly that we are wanting to address? So again, question mark. What? Why? How? All these things need to be a part of that process of defining stage. So can anyone frame a problem statement for Padman? What was the problem that he was looking at?
Realization of problem.
Sorry.
Yeah, this one.
Who is speaking? Yeah.
Yeah. Realization of problem
Yes.
to the needy.
Yes. So what exactly was the problem that he was looking at?
Because she didn't accept that this was an actual problem and this is a difficult to accept.
Okay. So he realized that was part of the problem, that she also is not realizing that this is a problem. Okay. And, but he defined it as a problem. So the woman is going through a difficult phase when she is menstruating. She doesn't have access to clean, hygienic, sanitary materials. Because of that, she may be ending up with certain physical problems, mentally, of course. Also, there are a lot of factors associated with that. So, now, of course, that is a problem that she is not realizing that it is a problem. But why is she not realizing? Perhaps she is not allowed to talk about it. It's not an issue about which people would like to talk about openly, especially in that rural setup, in that, you know, typical patriarchal setup. And so in many places, and I mean many people I know, they refer to menstruation itself as a problem. What is happening? Oh, I am having that problem. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great initiative. So, recognizing that that problem is there. So, women are facing that stigma. There is that, even, I mean, us, when we are going to a shop to buy a sanitary pad, usually what do they do? They wrap it up. They wrap it up. Yeah. Yes, ma'am, we'll come to that. You are doing a lot of good stuff, good initiative. But of course, I think the first process that you did was to understand that these women have that problem. Okay, so defining the problem and then, you know, finding pathways or strategizing how to encounter that problem. So defining is very, very important, and that will, a focused problem statement will help you, guide you towards the solution. Okay, once we have defined, what do we do? I think it was repeated a number of times. We throw out the box. Okay, we throw out the box. Because, as I think Einstein said, if we think about the same issue in the same way, we will arrive at the same result. Right? We won't be, if we don't think anew, if we don't create new solutions, we will end up with that same result or the same, you know, outcome that we had already. So the thing is, we just push away the box, go beneath the layers, beneath the labels, beneath the stereotypes, and be as weird, as crazy, as innovative, as, you know, open as possible. When you are thinking about solutions, try everything. What did Padman do? You remember? He himself used it. Okay, he himself, you know, created solutions, thinking, okay, what would she like? What is, so various aspects he was trying to address. So he may have come up with various solutions, and he himself has said that he failed so many times. But at that stage of creation of that solution, he was not thinking that I may fail. At that stage, when we are creating solutions, when we are ideating, thinking about solutions, we think that this is right. Okay? We don't think that this is wrong. So at that stage, you just go into that phase of just thinking, ideation. You may do it only by yourself, but if you engage with the audience for whom you are designing, if you engage with others who probably your friends, your peers, your colleagues, whoever, you may come up with many more ideas than you yourself will come up if you do individually. Of course, with Padman, what happened was that Google was his bestest friend, which helped him come up with a variety of solutions, right? So once we have all this list of ideas, what do? We have generated probably tens, thousands of solutions. But now we come to that stage where we have to evaluate and think whether this solution is difficult, whether it's viable, whether it's feasible, whether it's important, whether it's addressing that problem. So that evaluation has to happen, and once you have gone into that iteration, done thinking over and over again, you will probably select maybe 1, 2 solutions which are passing that test of feasibility, importance, difficulty. So now you have come up with a solution which you think should go forward. But will you just implement it? Okay, I have thought of this design, let's just implement it, send it forward. Will that pass? No. So first, the next stage is that you come to prototyping. You have to communicate that solution to the audience. You have to, in order to engage the audience, the user, how they will use it, whether they comprehend it, so whether they will be able to use it. So the first thing to do is to put that down, somewhere, communicate that idea. So you may communicate in the form of a model, a cardboard model. You may communicate in the form of a story, or just a wireframe kind of a thing, a role play, anything, a script, it can be anything. But you have to communicate or use some, mode of, putting that idea across to the audience. So this is the prototypes phase where we create rough designs of the solution. Padman did that. So he created a number of solutions. He saw that there was this machine for creating, so he probably thought that a machine for making sanitary napkins is the best possible solution, okay? But the thing was that the machine was very expensive, and that was the core problem. So how to create a machine which will give us the same product but at a lower cost. So from that one costly machine, he tried and understood what are the different processes which are involved in that machine to create the sanitary napkin. So he came up with 4 different processes. So he combined those 4 different processes into one machine in order to come up with the same product but at a very low cost. So that was the prototype. So once we have done this prototype, what is the next stage? Where do we go? Execution. Okay. So we have created very rough design of the solution. If we just put it out without testing, do you think it will work? So we need to get feedback. Again, go into a next level of empathy, understanding whether the user will actually be able to use that solution. So From prototyping, we go into testing phase, and in test, we try to engage with the audience, not just, he did not really ask his fellow men whether this solution will work, though he himself did test. He used it. He tried, if you recall from the movie, he used it himself with a bottle of blood or whatever, and then he tried to see whether it works, whether that solution works. And of course, when he went with his solution to his wife, to the other women in the community, what did they do? What did they do? They denied. Did they accept it? No. They ostracized him. Yeah, so his wife didn't talk to him. So at that point, perhaps he would have, thought that this isn't working. But there was one audience, one person who tested, who accepted to test whether it's working for her or not. So that is what we do. We test and see whether this is usable, whether this is comprehensible, whether this is something which is guided by the entire process that we have taken up till now. So is it guided by the problem statement? Is it guided by the data that we have received on the audience? So all this will go into the testing phase, and it is very, very important that we test with a real audience, right? And we must be prepared. So when we were, thinking about solutions, we were thinking that this is right, what we are doing is right. But when we are testing, we have to go into it with that thing in mind, that this may be wrong. As Sanjeeta said, we can't get too attached with the solution. We have to be ready to fail fast, fail cheaply, fail small, right? So that's why we create very rough designs. We don't go in with a very perfect solution. So we test it, and then once we have tested it, all these may be parameters. So you may come up with your own set of, criteria on what to test with. And what do? Once we have tested that and we record all that feedback, we go back again into that process. And we refine the prototype. Again we have a new set of data about the audience, that the audience is liking it, not liking it, facing this problem in implementing this. And then we use that data, those insights, to actually refine the prototype, and then that step comes in for execution, next level. So these are the 5 steps. Since this is a masterclass, of course, usually we have a 5-day process or a 7-day process, of going through each and every step of it. But because of limited time, so I hope we are able to come back with you with some basic things of how you can do it. But the end thing which I would like to close is trust the process. This is something you may feel that there's such a lot of questioning, such a lot of processes going back and forth, things are failing, you will feel disappointed, but trust the process, like Padman did. He trusted his own, that power of innovation, that understanding that he had developed of the problem. So he trusted that, and he came up with a solution. And that he is a class 10th dropout, I think. And he presented his solution, which is now an accepted solution, and in front of a global audience. So we have to trust that process, that this is the way it's not necessary that you use it only for, work-related problem-solving situations. These are things which, these are processes which we can use in our daily life, in our daily interactions with people. In simple things, we are designing experiences. So if you are designing a birthday party, for example, you understand that the child is probably turning 18. So what is the kind of, data around 18-year-olds? If it's a boy, probably you will think that way. So all these things are going, somewhere or somehow these are all working. The only thing we need to keep in mind is that this is a systematic process and we have to trust that process. So this is it. And as I said, that we can go back and forth till we arrive at that solution. And thank you all for listening. So there are some very good resources online. Even we trust Google Baba for coming up with some remarkable data. And we are there in case any of you want to reach out to us, or, because as human-centered designers, we would like to really help and support organizations and people. If you think that we can, in any way be a part of your journey, please reach out to us. Thank you so much.